The award means even more given the distinguished nature of the university, a focus of intellectual excellence, but also situated in one of the most ancient and beautiful settings in Europe. It is indeed a pleasure and a privilege to be here this morning. Let me especially thank Professor Piotr Sztompka for his very fulsome, detailed, and I have to say, fairly accurate summary of my writings. Professor Sztompka is a far more distinguished sociologist than I am, and you should be proud to have him as part of this university. As was said, I am a former head of the London School of Economics, where, as many people here will know, we had many distinguished Polish scholars teaching in the LSE, such as the celebrated anthropologist Malinowski, who made such a global impact, really, on anthropology when he was teaching at the London School of Economics. And we've also been pleased to welcome many Polish scholars, Polish visitors, and indeed Polish politicians, prime ministers, and others to the LSE during my time there, but also subsequently. As a former head of the LSE, let me, in the beginning, reiterate that to me, universities have a fundamental public role. By that, I don't mean that they necessarily have to be wholly state-funded. I mean that universities are there to carry out research, to pursue intellectual excellence in the context of having a wider effect and a positive effect in the societies of which they are a part. They are beacons of civilization and at the same time at the cutting edge of innovation. It is a role which, in my view, must be sustained in these contemporary days. Even in my country, at least, universities at the moment are being engulfed by a wave of privatization and commercialization. Universities have to monitor away between the need, of course, to pay for themselves in the wider world, but we must sustain the traditional values of the university in the hyper-modern context in which we live. I believe this is a fundamental battle which is being fought in most universities across the world, and we have to approach it with subtlety, but with vigor, to defend what universities are for and what they should do in a world which is changing massively before our eyes. So in my view, this is a battle that has to be fought and won, not just here, but in virtually all industrial countries across the world. Let us strive to keep the established values of universities intact in this period of global transformation. At the same time, at least it seems to me, universities must open themselves up to change, especially at a period where, as I argued in the lecture I gave in another part of this university yesterday, the pace and scope of change today is arguably greater than at any previous period in history, including even that of the original Industrial Revolution. I tried to set that out in my speech yesterday, and I have to say, I really enjoyed it, and it was great to have such a large student audience. I thought they were wonderful, the students. I talked to them in substantial numbers after, as Professor Novak knows, and it's a very different occasion from this one, but certainly equally rewarding to me. And we must steer the younger generation in a direction which is appropriate for the values which universities are there to pursue. However, we have to see what to do in this wave of change, and it's really important universities don't close themselves off from it. As I mentioned in my speech yesterday, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, Michel Foucault, argued that our modern civilization, our modern societies, are built upon centralized discipline institutions. He talked and he demonstrated how in the late 18th century you see the rise of the factory, the office, schools, prisons, mental asylums, hospitals, and universities in their modern form. None of these existed in the same guise previously. However, it is possible in the early years of the 21st century that we are entering an age where Foucault is going into reverse. Or rather, when these core institutions in our society are being reconstructed and are becoming more decentralized, more fluid and open. In schools, for example, certainly in my country, but in many countries across the world, the model in which a teacher stands in front of the class with the children in disciplined lines is becoming transformed. All of the institutions of which Foucault spoke are in the process of potential radical transformation. A good example is the prison, which is a core part of what he was writing about. We now know that you can keep people under 24-hour electronic surveillance. They don't need to be in prison. There's a very strong movement to take large numbers of people out of prison because in prison you tend to become a criminal. And therefore, most of these institutions could, in my view, almost certainly will become more decentralized. So far as the workplace goes, the same is manifestly true. The rise of the just-in-time economy, driven primarily by digital transformations, has very little role for the traditional workplace. It is far more fluid and open, and we don't as yet know what it's going to do to the economy, but the effects on the economy are massive and profound. Universities must monitor these trends and seek to adopt positively and creatively to them. The campus-based university looks secure for the moment, but for how long? If you look at the rise of massive open online courses, they are available literally to millions of people across the world. Often people have no resources, they don't have to pay for them. You can study in any continent of the world, following lectures of the best professors at Harvard, MIT, and other schools. At the moment, you can do it for nothing. This is an amazing incipient transformation for education. And we don't really know where it will lead, so far as the traditional university is concerned. But if we don't find a way of opening out to some of these changes, then it would have serious implications for what universities will become in the future. We want this to be something which enhances the role of universities, not something which is regarded as the enemy. It is a major, major possibility. When you can educate millions of people in Africa or Asia, who've got no other resources, when they can participate online in open discussion groups as they can, you can be part of a small seminar group across the world, and you can have regular interaction in much the same way in which you would in a physical group. This is extraordinary in terms of its implications down the line, in my view, for higher education. The same thing applies to research. Why is this a period of, as I was saying last night, and the rector was, I was mentioning medical research, why is this a period when you're getting, like, in some areas, geometric expansion in research and new findings? Well, one of the main reasons is that you can talk to anyone across the world in your subject